Hey guys, how you doing? My name is Lena. Welcome back to another video. So today we're going to talk once again about dark fantasy. It's been a while since I've recorded that first video, so today we're going to do part 2. I have another 10 recommendations from you. Not from you, for you. That I have read since recording that video, if I remember correctly. I think these are all like newly read books to me. But yeah, without further ado, let's just get started. As always, these books are dark fantasy or even grim dark fantasy, so careful with trigger warnings. There's a lot of death, torture, blood everywhere. So please, if you are sensitive to any type of that stuff, please check out trigger warnings for that specific book. Now we can start. So the first one that I have here is We Men of Ash and Shadow by H.L. Tinsley. This is one of the finalists for SPFBO this year. If you haven't heard about that contest, it's a self-published fantasy contest for self-published authors. It's actually organized by Mark Lawrence, so definitely check those books because they are always amazing. But in this one, we're going to follow Vanguard. He is basically the right hand of this man called Sanguine. He takes out criminals almost every single night. So he's kind of an assassin, but you're a good type of assassin. The thing is, there's a lot to unpack in this book. The city feels dark. It's also set on a kind of pre-industrial or industrial type of era. So it definitely does not feel like full-on magical world. But the thing is, and I'll just tell you this because it was like a pet peeve of mine when I read this, but there's definitely a low magic system in here. Like, there's barely any magic. It's mostly like, it feels inspired by something like Peaky Blinders, Priest of Flies, something kind of a more gang type of story. It's not technically like a gang, but it has that type of feeling, you know? Still, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Vanguard is such a cool character to follow. His backstory was superb. And the second book is actually coming out very, very soon in April. So I highly recommend that you check out this first book and then try it. But yeah, I really liked it. Then a book that I've either talked very recently or I will talk very soon about, but this is Dark Apprentice by Van Neel. Well, this book is a very different type of tone inside dark fantasy, because it does have a pinch of like dark humor to it. Like, it's not fully on like gloomy and dark. Like, it definitely has like some pinches that are very extravagant, and sometimes like it's just like, wait, what? But in this one, you're going to follow Nikolai and Medea. Medea is this super powerful and super old magi, and she has always taken apprentices, but the thing is, her apprentices almost all the time try to kill her once they learn like sufficient things. So Nikolai is trying very hard to become her apprentice, and he finally does. They have like this back and forth where Nikolai is definitely wishing to kill her, and she's trying to just like kind of change his mind while teaching him. It's super cool, man, like super cool. But Nikolai is a psychotic bitch, so his thoughts are super dark. Like, there's a death all the time in there, and there's definitely maiming, torturing, a lot of that in this one. But yeah, definitely not like gloomy dark, but dark topics for sure. Like, this is dark fantasy, and I refuse to believe otherwise. But this one is my favorite book of the year for now, so I highly recommend that you try it. It was so good. Then a definitely super dark one. This is Beyond Redemption by Michael R. Fletcher. If you have never read Michael R. Fletcher and you like dark fantasy, what are you waiting for? Because this dude is so fucking good at grim dark and dark fantasy, like on another level. Every single one of his series is just so fucking dark, and it has like so many cool elements added to them. Amazing. But this is the newest one that I have read. It's not his newest book, but the one that I have read more recently. And let me tell you, this world is just so cool. You're basically going to follow like two main sides here, because the thing is, in this city, they are trying to build a god, because the magic here works based on belief. So if people believe in you, you can actually become a god. It's just so weird. It makes so much more sense in the book. But the thing is, this child, soon to be god, like soon to be ascended to godhood, is kidnapped. So the story is basically about one side trying to claim him back and one side being just like, what the fuck do we do with this child? It's super weird, definitely very dark, one of the darkest ones that I have in here. Like, damn. But the magic system in here was the best part. Just the belief implemented in there was so cool. Don't be fooled by the Western type of look that this book has. For some reason, I discovered that I'm not the first one to think this, but it's definitely not a Western. It's your more typical medieval fantasy, but it's just so cool. The magic system here is so cool. The plot is a bit weak sometimes, but just the magic system alone deserves a read. Like, it's just so good. Then I have here another one of the darkest ones. This is An Altar on the Village Green by Nathan Hall. So I read this last month and it was so good. Let me tell you. So in here, our main character is baptized as a lance, meaning that he can drink his god's ichor, and then he's like chained to an anchor, and every time he dies fighting this horse, he can come back to life. And the ichor also heals him. Does it remind you of something? Yes, because this book is heavily inspired by Dark Souls, Bloodborne, FromSoft in general, and you can tell from the moment you start. Like, it's just literally like being on a spin-off. It's so cool to see this as a written form. Basically, this lance is sent to fight this horse, and along the way he comes across this village with the green altar, and some horror is just stuck in here, just torturing these people. The coming back every single time you die, the time also kind of resets. It's so cool. It's very desperate, and there's also these flashbacks. Every time the lance dies, he gets memories from another lance, so he learns something and then he can beat the next thing. It's super cool, but definitely super dark. Like, the ambience in this book is so dark and so oppressive sometimes. Like, it's so coolly like portrayed here. Amazing. I highly recommend this one. I'm 100% sure that if you like dark fantasy, you're going to really like this one. It also like is a very super fast story. Like, it just takes place on what feels like one night, even though it's definitely not. But super good. On a more light tone, we have Winds of Strife by Yu Goodman. I also read this book recently and really liked it. It's definitely dark fantasy, but because of its dark topics, not like his dark ambience and feeling. Like, the world is definitely a bit dark, but not too dark that it feels like oppressive and gloomy all the time. So in this one, you're going to follow Nye. He's a witch hunter, but the thing is, his family was murdered when he was a child, so he decided to join the witch hunters to take them from the inside. There's a lot going on in this book, but again, the coolest thing for me was the magic system. The magic system in here is so complex, so well done. Like, you literally have like reminders of everything before some chapters, just to like, hey, remember, this was about. So cool. Like, it's based around emotions and how to harvest them. Like, for example, if you harvest calm, you get like this kind of shield around you, but it also has like its cons. For example, it makes you less empathic. It's just so cool. Like, honestly, my favorite magic system from this year. Definitely. Like, the magic system I love. Even though Beyond Redemption has a great magic system, this one, over the top. Like, and I really cannot wait to discover more. Like, I have a feeling there's something beyond this, and I just want to know. Like, it's just so cool. But yeah, it's also a story about revenge, which was amazing. So yeah, in general, I really highly recommend that you check out this one. Like, it will scratch that itch, you know? It's just great. So, in a very different tone from the others, I'm going to recommend you Alice by Christina Henry, because this is more horror than dark fantasy. But still, this is probably the darkest fantasy book I've read in a while. Like, none of these books have made me feel so uncomfortable as this one. Like, no shot. It's basically a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, but the fucking darker thing, you can actually think about. Like, there's even like sex trafficking in here. It's super, super dark. You will probably feel disgusted most of the time, but holy fuck. Like, I wasn't expecting it. Like, I knew it was going to be darker than the original story, but I had no idea it was this dark. I'm actually super excited to read other books by this author, by Christina Henry. Like, I feel like they're going to be fucking amazing, because this shit was so dark, and I wasn't even expecting it. Like, it was so dark. I literally had like my headphones on, and I was just like, I cannot listen to this shit anymore. Like, it was so dark and straight to the heart sometimes. Like, try this shit, honestly. Like, it's so fucking dark. Then another recent read of mine, this is Gunmetal Gods, which I actually really enjoy. This is a fantasy book inspired by the Crusades, and it's definitely their fantasy. It's going to be set around the capture of this city, but you also have like this weird angel look like gods. The best part. I love the world building in this book. Like, it was my favorite part. I was okay with the plot. The characters I just really didn't like. They were so like gray and dumb sometimes, but understandable. Like, it was a good context for it wasn't a good context to the story. But still, the mythology in here, the best. So cool. I really cannot recommend this book enough. If you like, it reminded me of a very twisted version of The Grace of Kings, in a sense, because there are more POVs in here, but two of the main ones, they remind me of Mata and Kuni so badly. I don't know why, but it just kept popping in my mind, that thought. Also highly recommend this one if you are a dark fantasy fan. You're in for a treat. This next one, it's definitely horror fantasy, but I just wanted to include it here because there are really not horror fantasies out there, like not that many. So I just want to give this one a little recognition, but this is Hellmouth. This is actually a novella. It's like 60 pages long, super short, but straight through the gut, like, oh my god. It's basically about a group of mercenaries that are sent to this village, and once they get there, they discover this hole that apparently leads to the underworld. Definitely fantastical elements, paranormal elements, but it's just so good. Like, I literally do not want to tell you anything else besides that this book is fucking great. This novella, the second best thing that I've read this year. So good, so much going on in those little pages. Highly recommend it, like highly recommend it. Then definitely dark, but more on a lighter tone, is The Maleficent Seven by Cameron Johnson. I loved this book last year. It was one of my favorite books of last year. I just love it so much. But in this one, you're basically going to follow this general. And the thing is, she used to be like this old, super powerful, mighty figure. And then on the middle of the war, she disappeared. So now, several years later, this empire that now is super gigantic again, is about to strike back, and she comes out of the shadows and tries to assemble her previous commanders. And the commanders are just like a pirate queen, a necromancer, a vampire, an ogre. This book is definitely dark fantasy, but it's also a very like a dark humor type of fantasy. But dude, it is so good. Like, it's so good. It's one of the few books that the moment I finish it, I was just like, I want to read this one again. And I really want to do it soon. But literally, it's so good. Like, I cannot recommend this one enough. So, our last dark fantasy book for today is going to be The Helm of Midnight by Marina Lostetter. Hear me out. This is set on a kind of a world that feels more Victorian, like Jack the Ripper type of era, you know? But we're going to follow 3 different POVs. 2 of them are in the past and 1 of them is in the present. And the present one is our main one and is about the disappearance of this mask that has like the soul, let's call it that, the soul of a previous detained and killed serial killer. Now that this helm is on the loose, murders are starting happening again. It's so cool. You're going to follow the POV of the killer several years back, a maiden, and this detective, this investigator. She is the fucking best. She reminded me a bit of Fatma in Master of Jinn. But dude, honestly, one of the most underrated books I've ever read. Like, it's so good, so dark, so perfectly dark. The ambience is just like dark enough, and the magic is just super cool, super different. Cannot recommend this one enough. Like, just try this one. So yeah, those were basically all my recommendations for today. Have you read any of these books? Do you have more dark fantasy books to recommend me? Please, I'm always open to suggestions of dark fantasy. Like, I just love it so much. But not First Law. I have already read it, so it's fine, it's fine. But yeah, in that case, just leave a comment down below. But as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye.